Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about Red Reboot and the Dimensional Barrier. Yeah, well, whatever. But before that, I have a few gems and I was hoping I could maybe get like either IP or, well, Altar IP or maybe like, I don't know, some more your cards here from here. I actually like having none. So we have uh Ignister Prominence, which I already had, and that's about it. I don't have enough to play any of the decks here. Unfortunate, I guess. And, oh no. I don't see a single guaranteed UR here. Well, is that not unfortunate? Don't really care about anything here, aside from the URs, honestly. Oh, let's go. At least one UR. Oh, alright, foil. Okay. I'll take pretty much anything new. Like any new URs. Like I would not mind Gas Angel. I would not mind most things. I don't think the URs are like super bad here. Aside from the ones I happen to have. Unicorn, my first copy. Nice. I already have copies of Birth, it seems, so... Still just looking for URs. So, if you guys saw the video where I did my pulls, I actually pulled like nothing aside from Ignister Prominence. And of course, that means I also didn't pull that many URs as well. I believe I put in like 7,000 gems worth of pulls. Well, that's what I did, I guess. So, like, if I get a second Fenrir, I'll just be happy. For now. And then I can probably swap over to a different pack and start pulling from that, I guess. Alright. There's a chance we get some good stuff here. Maybe not. I have so much SR crafting points that I really couldn't care less what I get, unless it's a UR. I'm pretty down bad here. Alright, let's see. Second Fenrir. Alright. Crafting from here is not nearly as bad. But I still do want the pen cards as well, because I have like a full playset of like most like pen cards. I have like Electromite, Beyond the Pendulum. I have like 3 Revolution Dragons, I think. So getting those would be great. Oh. Kinda saw a Valence there, but that reminds me, do you guys know about like that disgusting Valence list? It kinda just ends on floodgates. Kinda boring, kind of annoying, if you ask me. So let's see. Third Fenrir. That's no bueno. I have a feeling they won't be putting Fenrir to 3. Yeah, that sucks. If I could get a refund on that Fenrir now, that'd make my day, but no chance, right? Surely not. Well, that's something, isn't it? Well, yeah. So, about that Valence thing I'm talking about, actually, I'll go to the deck builder first. So, there's like some things that are really notable that Valence can do right now, so we'll start with this. So, with this card, Koenig Weiss in here, this is actually pretty annoying. So, instantly, this prevents you from using evenly matched because you have a field spell, and getting rid of a field spell is like really annoying. I don't know how you would get rid of like a field spell that you have. If you like were to set a field spell, for example, that wouldn't do it either. You would still control the card, so you can't evenly. Alright, so not bad yet. And then after this, right? Now they can pretty easily search secret village. So they also have spellcasters for this. We have like Beyond the Pendulum. So this is a spellcaster. It looks a bit weak, but that's fine because you can also link this into Artemis. Actually, not Artemis. Wait, which one's the other one? It's not Artemis. Wait. Wrong one. What was it called? Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. So that's 1850. So not nearly as weak. Not that it really matters. This could have 0 attack points and you wouldn't be able to get over it because they will likely also summon, let's see, Chronochasm Valence. Chronochasm Valence, just consider it DP. It pops a card, non-targeting, alright? It doesn't float or anything, but might as well just consider it like DP, okay? So, yeah. This will pop a card. And at first, this doesn't look very relevant, and then you realize the combo doesn't normal summon. And that's where they special summon Gallant Granite. And then their target is this, Fossil Dyna. Oh, great, now they have Fossil Dyna, and now you're pretty locked. So, let's check what you can actually do. So, they'll probably also make Apollosa as well, which you likely won't be able to beat over. But anyways, so first we have Fossil Dyna, so neither player can special summon monsters, but they're already done special summoning. So it's more like you can't special summon, and you have to play into their board, of course. So you can't beat over Fossil Dyna by doing a inherent special, like with, we'll say, Kishtira Fenrir. You can't special summon Fenrir, attack over Fossil Dyna. You can't normal summon, attack over Fossil Dyna, because the Valence DPE will just pop your normal summon monster, and you probably can't normal summon again. And you're just done, so. And you also cannot activate, of course, any spells unless you control a spellcaster monster. So, most decks, like, just don't have a spellcaster, right? So, nothing you can do. Like, you can't Forbidden Droplet, and you can't, like, Super Poly. There's not much you can do in this case, right? So, none of those work. You can't evenly match because they gave you a field spell, and good luck removing that field spell, I guess, considering you can't, like, activate, like, anything that can get rid of it, honestly. Yeah, it's just suffer. So then, let's see. What can you do? I guess you can hand trap them to stop them from setting this up. So, that's great. Pretty obnoxious end board. It's just stun, but with a little bit of combo to get there. That's one way to look at it. Perspective. Not very fun. And then, of course, we have, let's see. Let's get rid of these extra cards real fast, actually. Bam. Okay. Really don't care about those SRs I pulled. But anyways. So, Dimensional Barrier. This card, completely stupid if you're going first with this. So this card, not even slightly fair. So if I have Dimensional Barrier and I'm going first, for example, then, like, just with Dimensional Barrier in my deck, right, I can run 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier, and then control decks, of course, can run Extrav, and Extrav is, of course, also a possible 3 of, and then you have, like, Prosperity as well, which you can also run. Prosperity doesn't need to be at the Start of anything. Okay. So you can run these two together, whatever. So you can dig pretty deep. But you don't even need all of these cards, I guess, technically. But whatever. So, of course, when you open, when you're playing 40 cards and you get your opening hand, the odds of getting any 3 of card is about 30%, and then to get a 1 of is like 10%, so like 1 in 10 games, and 1 in 3 games respectively. So if we logically like double the amount of cards we have, like, that can potentially be Dimensional Barrier, then pot of Extrav is draw 2. So every single pot of Extrav or pot of Prosperity is also a potential another chance at getting Dimensional Barrier. So that's just worth considering. So it's very likely that you'll just have Dimensional Barrier, like, if you run it as a 3 of in a control deck. And that's obvious enough, I guess, right? And playing into Dimensional Barrier is fairly hard, and for some reason this can also be used to outboards, because it also is like a pseudo skill drain, being able to negate the effects of all monsters of that type while they're on the field. So like, for example, declare Synchro, and that'll like negate Baron and stuff, right? And that's pretty obnoxious as well, that it can be used to like outboards and continuously, well, we won't go there yet. So, Dimensional Barrier, if I just open this turn 1, and then I set this card, what can my opponent do against Dimensional Barrier? So, first off, no form of removal works, and if I am playing something that would give me information on what my opponent is playing, like let's say I'm playing, I don't know, Runic, sure, and I activate Runic tip, and then I tip, banish, I don't know, let's say, Sprite Blue. Then I know my opponent is playing Sprite, and I might declare, like, XYZ preemptively. So you can't even run, like, that ridiculously specific, like, spell that's, like, you can't respond, send a card, like, send a back row card to the graveyard. Whatever that is, you can't use that in that case, but I guess if you are playing that, that would work to out Dimensional Barrier. If you knew which card was Dimensional Barrier, because it's a control deck, they likely have multiple sets. So, assuming they have 2 sets, that's 50% chance you hit Dimensional Barrier. They have 3, you have a 30% chance. If they have 4, you have a 25% chance to correctly hit the correct back row, in this case Dimensional Barrier, which is the card that will stop you from playing the game. And Dimensional Barrier, of course, stops like most decks from playing, aside from like pretty much just control decks. So, for example, I don't know, let's say DD, declare Pendulum. Now, the only thing you can do with DD is like maybe Fusion Summon if you have the right monsters in hand. And you can still activate your Pendulum effects, I guess, which is nice, cool. It can declare Pendulum, and then you can't do anything. For example, if you're playing Pure Ignites, just saying, they can just stop you from playing your crappy normal Pendulum deck. And honestly, it is a pretty garbage deck right now. I don't know what you do with these cards. I mean, you have Isolde. Maybe I'm missing something with Ignites. You guys can tell me all about it, I guess. But, yeah, you can declare Pendulum, you can declare XYZ, Synchro, Fusion, Ritual. The only thing you can't declare is Link. And, of course, if you're playing a controlled deck, if you have a Link monster, you're usually doing like a Link 1 play or something, or going Link 2. So if you go into your Link 2 and it gets popped or negated or whatever, you're screwed. If you can't go into your Link 1, you're screwed. That's basically how it goes. So, for example, with like Code Talkers, let's say I normal summon, I don't know, whatever's fine. Let's say Lady Debug, and then Lady Debug gets like Solemn Judgmented. So now you have no normal summon, and likely no way to special summon with a like an empty board. The only thing you might be able to do is like special summon Link Slayer. If you have Link Slayer in your hand, I guess. That might work. Like, pretty rough situation to be in either way, going second into D barrier, of course. So, reasonably with generics though, the only generic that you would reasonably be able to run into dimensional barrier, of course, is Red Reboot. And now, this presents multiple issues. So first off, Red Reboot is a card that is at 2. So the odds of you having Red Reboot is less than your opponent having Dimensional Barrier. It slightly helps that you will have technically 6 cards in hand, kind of, right? And that will help you a bit, you know, just having Red Reboot in your hand to negate Dimensional Barrier. But of course, there is counterplay to Red Reboot, because it's not as strong as like a Super Poly, which can't be responded to, or like a Kaiju, which also can't be responded to. And those two cards, for example, are much harder to deal with or prepare like an answer for, which is honestly like pretty bullshit if you can prepare an answer for those cards, because they're pretty strong and they're meant to be strong, so the going second player can actually play going second. And in this case, since we have Red Reboot at 2, let's just say we have the worst case scenario to an extent. So I spelled judgment wrong again. Alright, so let's say our opponent opened 1 of D Barrier and then 3 of Solemn, and then they have like something else. It doesn't really matter what that something else is, but let's say they have 3 of Solemn and 1 of Dimensional Barrier. So now, even if you have Red Reboot doesn't work here, even if they play this in the worst way possible. So let's assume they don't activate like D Barrier, but you know they have D Barrier, but they don't quite know what you're playing yet, so they're holding off on D Barrier, I guess. But you do have 2 Red Reboot in your hand, and you don't know their other sets. They have 3 sets, and they're all Solemn Judgment. Okay, I activate Red Reboot to Solemn Judgment. Oh, Solemn Judgment to my Red Reboot. Okay. And then, boom, I will activate my copy of Red Reboot, but again, my other Red Reboot. And then my opponent activates Solemn Judgment, but again. Okay. I guess I lose, and then D Barrier resolves. There's nothing you can do, you know? So Solemn, of course, can just stop Red Reboot, and there's nothing you can do about that. Nothing. Literally nothing. Because Solemn Judgment is a counter trap. And in this case, all you can do is maybe back row removal. But let's say we don't even need to take this into equation, right? Just remove this stuff from the equation for a second. Okay, so back row removal, first off, doesn't work against Dimensional Barrier, because your opponent can just declare your type, or whatever you're playing. So this is really, like, bad with, like, Labyrinth. Or, like, for example, aside from Labyrinth, we have, let's say, Runic, once again. Let's go for Runic. So, whatever. So, lovely Labyrinth here can pop a card in your opponent's hand. They can do this the first turn, and in a good hand, I guess, they can do that, right? Or it's not that hard. I'm not sure. Whatever. So, they pop a card in your hand, and they get information. Let's say they pop a DD card. They know to call Pendulum. They can call it in the standby before you can do anything. And you're cooked, right? So, even if you have back row removal, you wouldn't be able to do anything to D Barrier here in this case. And, like, for example, if you're playing a meta deck right now, Fusion and XYZ are probably the most prominent right now. So they can just 50-50 call with D Barrier, and you're just screwed. So, like, for example, right now people are testing Kishtira, and some people are still playing, like, Tearlaments and Branded, for example, just to name a few lists. So if your opponent just raw drops a Duster or some form of back row removal on you, like, anything's fine, like Duster, Evenly, doesn't really matter. You can D Barrier declare a monster type, card type, and then your opponent just can't play for that turn, which is just complete horseshit, basically, yeah. So, if you get hit by D-Barrier, there's nothing you can do. This is a Lingering Floodgate. You have no way to reasonably negate a Dimensional Barrier. You have just nothing you can do about it. Back row removal doesn't work, so the only option, of course, is like Red Reboot, which they have counterplay for, making this card completely unfair. And of course, we're playing best of one, so if a control deck ever becomes like tier 0, like so meta that people would consider playing like 3 Red Reboot, I think having the option to play 3 Red Reboot should be allowed. Like, who wants to play into this? No one wants to play into this. Like, then even still, it'll become like a still kind of like luck based. Like, will I have enough like Red Reboots for like my opponent's Solemn Judgment? How many Solemns do they have, right? And all of this doesn't even like begin to consider that Dimensional Barrier is searchable by like Labyrinth, which I haven't gone into yet, but Labyrinth can not just search this, but they can reset this every single turn. And of course, like I mentioned before, you have no out to Dimensional Barrier. There is no out. There is absolutely nothing you can do about Dimensional Barrier. And that issue is well, the issue with Dimensional Barrier is much worse if your opponent knows what you are playing. Like, say I'm playing, I don't know, Speedroid. Declare Synchro. Ah, I'm screwed. Basically, that's just how it goes. And this card, completely oppressive. But it's like even less respondable than like a Scythe. You can, like, called by Scythe? Well, you can attempt to in theory, right? Like, if your opponent doesn't have anything else with their Scythe, technically, I guess, but whatever. Called by Scythe, and that is okay. And then there is, like, Imperming Scythe, technically, and other stuff like that, right? But against Dimensional Barrier, I guess I just cry. There's nothing you can do about Dimensional Barrier, aside from simply open your 2 of Red Reboot, which is less than 3 of Dimensional Barrier. And of course, this is just assuming your opponent opens Dimensional Barrier. You don't even have to consider them, like, searching it or anything, because it's a 3 of that you can play. Just straight up. So your opponent can, what is the counterplay to your opponent? Literally, turn 1, set Dimensional Barrier, pass, and then you just have to have Red Reboot in hand. That is the only counterplay. There's, like, more or less nothing you can do about it, even if we just consider that. If you have back row removal, they can still shotgun it and still guess something that really harms you. And that just completely sucks ass. There is no good counterplay to Dimensional Barrier as it stands currently. The only saving grace you have is that Dimensional Barrier is like a purely going first card, so, well, almost purely a going first card, and you have a pretty good chance of being able to rock your opponent if they have Dimensional Barrier in their hand going second. So, like, let's say they have their Labyrinth stuff, you negate all their Labyrinth monsters, whatever, you can probably negate some of their other stuff, whatever. And then, even if they have Dimensional Barrier and they, like, essentially activate a skill drain on you, this only affects monsters on the field, I guess, so you can technically, like, go chain Baron and then droplet away Baron or something goofy like that, which is cool, I guess, but with D-Barrier, you'll still be able, even with D-Barrier, you'll still have a bunch of big guys, and you'll be able to, like, attack and clear their board a bit. And even if you can't clear their board or game them, D-Barrier's gone for the next turn, and you're, like, probably fine in that case. So that'd be, like, turn 3 D-Barrier. It's not nearly as bad. It's much more, like, tolerable, much more, like, possible to play around. Like, gameplay exists. Unlike when you know, stop my Evenly by giving me a field spell, stopping all of my spells by activating Secret Village, and then On top of that, normal summoning Fossil Dyna, and then removing my ability to remove Fossil Dyna. So I have no real ways to deal with that. Great. Very fun. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Has some pretty heinous floodgates, and I'm just hoping, honestly, that we get more, like, interaction. Like, even Adventure was not that bad. Like, did Adventure ever do this to you? Like, and yet Adventure right now is, like, we're at 2 rights and 1 of Water Enchantress. Why is that? Is Adventure that bad right now? Why is it still at 1? It was only really bad because of Verte. In fact, why don't we just ban Verte? Like, I wouldn't mind ban Verte. In fact, Verte doesn't even really need to be banned. It doesn't super matter since, like, Hulk gone. Are we not all okay with getting, like, Enchantress back to 2, at least, maybe? So it's at least a little more consistent, a little more playable. Like, having it at 3, like, 3 rights and 2 Enchantress would still be, like, okay. Or 1 Enchantress, 3 rights. Just, like, more access to the Adventure engine. That'd be pretty cool. Pretty nice. Make these cards actually playable. Right now, not super playable, even with Curse of Aramatir here. This card honestly sucks ass. You have to send a card from your hand to the graveyard. So first off, it's hand to the graveyard. Why can you not send from the field? If you could send from the field, it would be moderately better. But anyways, you have to send to the graveyard, not discard notably, so it doesn't work under macro. Doesn't work under anything like that. And then it locks you into adventure tokens and monsters for the whole turn. It's in the same way as, like, Branded Fusion, so that sucks. But we're getting a bit sidetracked here. So control here is completely impossible to deal with going second, is what it feels like if you're playing a combo deck. Because of mostly D-Barrier, in my opinion. If your opponent's playing D-Barrier, game feels over. The amount of decks that can play into, like, a D-Barrier, pretty minuscule. It's, like, very, very low. And you don't have many good plays. If your opponent D-Barriers you, it limits your plays. Like, even with Dinosaur, for example, you can actually somewhat play around the D-Barrier, having some, like, main deck stuff you can use instead. Like, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, which is a main deck monster, meaning it won't be possible to negate it with D-Barrier, but it locks you out of, like, either Synchros or XYZs, which you might potentially need if you can't OTK, and if you can't, like, set up, for example, Borreload Savage and Baron de Fleur, that can really suck. Or if you can't set up your XYZ Evil Swords to do some negates, it really hinders your plays. And that sucks, because you want to go into those. And the XYZs, of course, for the most part, I believe you go into them later. Well, it's not as possible to go into the XYZs as soon as you can go into, for example, I don't know, let's say Baron or Borreload Savage, I think, are easier to get into, are they? Well, it depends on the exact situation, I suppose. The XYZs, I think, are probably, like, notably not as good into control as, like, Synchros, I believe. So I believe you have 1 Spell Trap negate, actually, for your Evil Sword Spell Trap negate. So you're not doing too good in that regard. You're kind of just suffering here, really. There's not much you can do. Like, there are just no, like, blowout cards for you to play against control decks going second. in comparison to like combo now. Like we have Dark Ruler no more, we have Forbidden Droplet, and those aren't respondable and have very jank counterplay or like relatively difficult to access counterplay. Super Poly as well, for example. But no such card exists for like uh, control decks, for trap decks, and it's getting like moderately worse because like with Labyrinth, you have access to all of this garbage, so all of this is like super generic to the point where it pisses me off, honestly. So this searches any trap card. This allows you to activate a normal trap card, any normal trap card that was set this turn, and then that allows you to search like a bunch of heinous cards, basically. There's no wholesome card being searched off of like Lady Lab, trust me, on that one. And of course, Labyrinth 2 clock resets itself, all of this resets itself. And there's insane grind game and insane advantage being built. Like, so every single turn, it's actually becoming harder to out the board, and your options to out the board don't even realistically exist to an extent. So, like, even if you have Duster, does Duster save you? Not really. Lovely Lab will reset, like, whatever. And that'll do it. So, like, let's say you top deck a Duster on a later turn, that will make no difference. Your opponent likely already knows what you're playing, so they already know what to call on Dimensional Barrier. So, Duster, chain D Barrier, and even assuming you have, like, some starters and maybe an extender, like 2 cards, 1 starter, 1 extender, you can't play. Okay, even if you top deck Duster in that case, you're doomed. Like, assuming you didn't get lethal last turn, probably, I guess that's how it'd go. And they would probably have D-Barrier Yugioh on, like, turn 2, so this is likely, like, turn 4, and they just reset D-Barrier and did it again. Nothing you can do about that. The only card that works in this case is, like, literally just Red Reboot. Aside from that, you have nothing. Yeah. Great. But, of course, like I mentioned before, Red Reboot, they can respond to Red Reboot with a counter trap. Most notably, Solemn Judgment. If you get judgmented, you're doomed. And you have absolutely nothing you can do. And speaking of which, let's pretend Duster did do something. Solemn Judgment the Duster. Great. What do you do now? Suffer? I mean, I guess that's all that's left. And this doesn't, well, concern just Labyrinth, because, like, for example, even right now, we still have, like, Lord of the Heavenly Prison, so, like, against just normal-ass, dead-ass stun. Oh, Lord of the Heavenly Prison. So now all you can do is evenly, but at least it gives you the option to evenly, you know? But with Lord of the Heavenly Prison, Lightning Storm, Duster, neither of those work. That's not gonna happen. And then following this, we then have, let's see. After this, we also have Hugin. Hugin just protects every card on your opponent's field, basically. But why? Well, whatever. This protects, like, for example, I don't know. Let's say Goes in Match, Tikaboo, whatever. Those are perfectly playable. Great. What is Rivalry at now? Rivalry and, like, Gozen are both at 1 now, which is, like, okay. Not much you're going to be able to do against this. Gozen. I'm realizing now why Gozen isn't legal for the Dark Light event, I'm pretty sure. It better not be. Because now that I think about it, Ibli is probably legal. I would have to check if Ibli is legal, actually. Let's do that real quick. Ibli. Gozen. I guess Gozen is not legal, but Ibli is. So anyway, back to focusing on this. So, how do you deal with a dimensional barrier? You really can't. Going second, you have no answers. You just suffer. In general, going second in Master Duel is so bad right now. Having 3 red reboot would help a bit. And that's like what I mostly want from Master Duel right now, is just to either like have more, like, you can even keep some of your like relatively heinous like trap cards, but like if I have more copies of Red Reboot, I'm more okay with that, because it is your like going first, like it's what you're gonna do, right? Going first. So whatever, I do what I gotta do, you know? You do what you gotta do. You debarrier, whatever. And then, yeah, I guess suffer. And noticeably, you can only activate 1 dimensional barrier per turn is interesting, because if you Baron negated a dimensional barrier, your opponent can activate a 2nd dimensional barrier. Which is a bit, I just find that a bit humorous. While we're here though, there are a few cards I want to just talk about. So let's go with, alright, let's remove all these. So we have Subterror here. And like, some of these control decks, like the older ones, are they're kind of just complete garbage. So let's grab, I don't know, Skill Drain. Skill Drain is fine. And then let's go Baron. Warlord, Savage. So, if we have Subterror here, let's say we have Guru, sure, why not? And then we have, let's say, Final Battle. This is not the first turn, so we already have Final Battle and it can be activated. If we flip Guru up with probably like Hidden City, then Guru's effect as Search will be activated. And if our opponent attempts to Ash us, we can Final Battle, activate this effect. This turn, activated effects of Subterror cards cannot be negated. And then Ash Blossom and Joe Spring will not work on our Guru. And then our Guru will still be able to perform our Search, right? This also applies like if we are under Skill Drain. Even if Guru is negated, we can still activate Final Battle to make our Guru resolve. And that's great. And I guess also as a different kind of play, we can also set Guru back down, and Guru will not be negated by Skill Drain, which is also fine. But alright. Did you know if your opponent, however, activated, for example, Baron de Flor or Warlord Savage on Subterror Guru, and then you activated Subterror Final Battle, and then you use the effect of this turn, activated effects of Subterror cards cannot be negated, well, Guru is going to be negated. And you will not be able to resolve the Search effect. Why is that? Well, that is because Subterror Final Battle. This card prevents the activated effects from being negated. This does not prevent your activation from being negated, so if Warlord Savage Dragon negates the activation here, as you can see, negate activation, or Baron de Flor, negate activation. So in case of Warlord Savage Dragon, it will just simply negate Guru. In case of Baron de Flor, it will negate and then destroy Guru. And that really sucks, and this does not, like, allow you to play through, like, anything. Well, sometimes. Like, for example, we have Therion Regulus. If we have Therion Regulus instead, Therion Regulus negates effect, like Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. So then this would prevent, well, being negated by Regulus, and that's it. In this case. So, cool. You can't be negated by Regulus. And that's cool. Also worth mentioning, if you guys didn't know, during like battle, you can't negate effects, but you can negate activations. Why does Yu-Gi-Oh work like that? I don't know. But anyways, that means, for example, Ash Blossom and Joe Spring cannot negate a search or like anything that happens like during battle. But like a card like Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion can activate. I honestly don't know why it works like that, but that is how Yu-Gi-Oh works, I guess. So another example though is with like Invoked. So let's go grab Invocation, and then let's go here. We'll grab, where's Magical Meltdown here? Whatever. Oh hey, Magical Meltdown is back to 3. So anyways, now that we have Magical Meltdown, let's say we what attribute is Alistair? Huh, this is playable for the dark event, but Macabo's a light. Well, getting a little distracted here. Wait. Invoke Kaliga's a pretty nasty floodgate, though. Huh. We'll need to consider this for later. But anyways, with Alistair, if you go ahead and use Magical Meltdown, and then your opponent, of course, their sight is on Invocation. If we, of course, negate the activation, attempt to negate the activation for Magical Meltdown, it will not work. So in this case, like a Baron de Flor or a Boilerload Savage cannot negate the activation of like an Invocation while Magical Meltdown is on the field. So in this case, that let's say, I don't know. I guess it really doesn't matter. So Invocation can't be negated here like this, but if we had Therian King Regulus, we can negate Magical Meltdown because it negates the effect and not the activation. You can still attempt to negate with these two, but it just will do what people refer to as fizzling. You know, it resolves for no effect. It does essentially nothing. So that's cool. But if you were to use Therian King Regulus, that which negates effects and not activations, then like Invocation, I guess in this case, will not resolve and will be negated. Why does this exist? I don't know, but it's how the game works, I guess. And I guess this also notably applies to like Branded Lost. And this also has the same thing, the activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. So, the activation cannot be negated, but the effect can be negated. So, same thing with Branded Lost, like Branded Lost, Branded Fusion. Therion King Regulus can negate this. Very cool. Also worth mentioning, I guess, is that let me change this real quick, actually. Allow Forbidden. If we have a Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. So, with... Why can't I add this? What? Fine. With Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, we can technically negate an effect that, like, kind of works under Magical Meltdown. This is generic, like, any effect that fusion summons a fusion monster. Like, in this case, let's say we have, like, a Merly or something. This doesn't actually negate. This instead changes the effect. So it does not negate at all. So Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, for example, though, having the effect to change the effect would make both of us draw instead. And this isn't like a type of effect that's protected by Magical Meltdown or like Subterror Final Battle, which is interesting. So like, for example, if we have the new Gruffa, Dragon Overlord of Dark World, this also works. So regardless of if you have Magical Meltdown or Branded Lost, I can activate the effect of Gruffa to change the effect of your spell or monster effect or whatever. And then it instead becomes your opponent discards one card, which is pretty funny as well. But yeah, your opponent won't be able to negate your cards unless they, I don't know, simply negate your cards because they negate activations in this case. Or in this case, they negate effect. In which case, I guess your card's also negated. Or like, in case number 3, I guess we'll just simply, I don't know, remove the cards, you know? Or not remove the cards, change the effect. So it does something else entirely. So, yeah. That's great, I guess. And then I think there was one more thing. Oh yeah. Technically, you can still activate displacement. So, for example, let's say we just Zeus, and you're just activating like normal-ass polymerization, and then you don't have any monsters to fuse away. Well, I mean, your field spell's also gone, I guess, in this case, but, you know, what works, works. So I guess a better example might be if you can maybe... Let's see, we need something that removes, right? So let's go with, I don't know. Let's go with Doom King. Doom King is a vibe, you know? So let's say we have Doom King, which banishes a card. So let's say you have like an Alistair in the graveyard, and then, I don't know, Artemis on the field. Doom King, banish Alistair in graveyard, and then your invocation can't resolve because you don't have the targets to make anything with invocation anymore. So like that kind of thing still works, I guess, under this. So like, despite being like pseudo weird and kind of like garbage, I guess, at times, like, oh, I guess this just doesn't negate anything this doesn't prevent my opponent from negating my effects at all. So this is effectively a useless card right now. Like, this still gives more like interaction and more like thought, you know, to like cards being activated, you know, what we in the industry here might call brain cell activation, you know, aside from like, I don't know, I will set a card, pass, and then I will simply activate it the next turn with control decks. I much prefer like some level of thought process, like with this ruling stuff. It's like a little bit jank, I guess, but it also somewhat hurts these decks to an extent, but this still makes it more interesting than, like, for example, I don't know, I will just set a floodgate that lingers and activate it, and there is only one card in the game which you can, like, realistically use to out it. In this case, we're talking about D-barrier, you know? If my opponent does that, cool. I guess I will simply just lose, you know? And that is the duel. It's like, alright, I am a control player, I activate my, like, floodgate or whatever. Do you have the out? Yeah, you have the out? Alright, I surrender. There's nothing else I can do. Wait, really? Yeah. That was my entire game plan. Like, if you can out Tikaboo, I have nothing else. Like, that energy, that vibe, you know? That, in my opinion, is, like, pretty unfun gameplay. And that's, like, the other side of that is, like, oh, do you have, like, back row removal for my, like, Tikaboo? No? Guess I win. Oh yeah, I guess you do. GG. That is the game. Like, maybe we can play a bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Hopefully one of these days. But, like, floodgates, they're just, like, free wins going first. There's no reason not to play them. And, in fact, some of these floodgates are so disgusting, they can be played as going second cards as well, notably, like, a skill drain. If you, of course, have skill drain for turn 3, let's say our opponent just has a single Baron, let's say we flip Rivalry or whatever, doesn't really matter what it is, and then boom, flip skill drain. Oh, Baron is negated, and then, I don't know, you just wall up, and then, like, outgrind your opponent in this unfun game where it's like, oh, will they have, like, Duster or whatever? And then it turns out they only play one Duster, and you have a Solemn Judgment already, and that is the entire duel. And they just had to hope that you did not have a Solemn Judgment. Speaking of which, Duster. Why is this still at 1? It just destroys all spells and traps your opponent controls. What is so bad about this? In Master Duel format, like, you might even argue Harpy's Feather Duster is just worse than Evenly Matched and Red Reboot anyways. This could go to 3, could it not? It has no hard ones per turn, but does this mean anything? I don't think so. I don't think, like, anyone is ever going to play, like, more than 2 Duster. I really doubt anyone will play more than 2 Duster, but if you play 3, more power to you, I guess, in this theoretical situation. It doesn't really do a whole lot. So, cool, I guess. We're just suffering out here. And yeah, this was kind of like a bit of a control deck rant once again, but you know how it is with control. Pretty uninteractive, pretty unfun gameplay. That is why I personally much prefer like combo decks and playing against combo. And Labyrinth is basically like they have like 1 point of interaction for you to like hand trap anyways. And speaking of which, it invalidates like a lot of hand traps as well when you play control decks, and there are just no generics that you can play that reasonably make sense to play against like I guess control deck. If we had something that was kind of like pop 2 or something, like I guess if there was like a monster that could only be activated on your turn that you could discard to pop 2, that would be fine in my opinion. Like, why not? Like, pop 2, banish 2, but like, I don't know, it locks you or something. I don't know, like, maybe say it locks you into this specific XYZ archetype, or like, specifically into Dark XYZs or something goofy. I wouldn't mind something like that. That sounds perfectly fair to me, considering, like, it's not that much, like, different from, let's say, I don't know, let's say, like, Twin Twister, it's not, like, that far off. It has, like, merits to it. It wouldn't be, like, quick effect, it would be just Ignition, discard this as Ignition effect to banish 2 cards, you know? Sounds fine to me. And that would help because of floodgatey decks, and I guess it would have to specifically be a discard because, you know, yeah, this card exists, you know, Macrocosmos, everyone loves getting macroed. And no, like, most decks just don't play well under macro, but at least we have one that can play well under macro now, you know, with Kashtira, so that's one reason that you can like Kashtira. You might not like it later when it becomes, like, very, very heavily played. Right now, it's, like, just moderately being played, just because it's new. Like, if we don't get the support, like, soon, you'll see this, like, drop off pretty fast, I believe, so. That's most of what I wanted to say, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.